Hey everyone, welcome back to a new episode. I'm your host, Gemma Permalu. You would have heard of Kirat, whose story about how she was catfished by her own female cousin for 9 years became the subject of a 6-series podcast by Tortoise Media in 2021. It was then followed by a Netflix documentary called Sweet Bobby last year. When the documentary came out, I was quite shocked, had so many questions, and tried to reach out to Kirat and her team last year and didn't get a response back. Fast forward to this year in January, I found out that Kirat had been on a podcast on Shivani's Pal's Millennial Mind. And I remember texting my sister that day saying, oh, well, it turns out that she's going on podcast, but it doesn't matter. But we get to hear about her story in more details on someone else's podcast. Turns out that a week later, Kirat's team reached out to me. I guess somehow the power of manifestation. Now, before we agreed to a recording date, I got on a call with Kirat's team, and my understanding was that Kirat felt that her story was well portrayed during the podcast, which came out in 2021, but she somehow felt like she lost her voice when the Netflix documentary came out. Now, during my research for this conversation, I browsed and spent a lot of time on Reddit and other platforms just to see what you as an audience had to say, and my hope is to try to ask as many questions as possible, questions that all of us have in mind. But I'm afraid that we won't be able to get into all of these details, and I certainly didn't want Kirat to have to retell her story again. I know her story in itself has divided the internet and has led to some backlash. What I really want to ensure once this podcast is out is that you keep your comments as constructive as possible, as much as you may not agree with everything that's going to be said in this conversation. I certainly didn't want any meanness, and I know all of us can possibly afford to leave our comments as constructive as possible, as much as we may not agree with everything that's going to be said in this conversation. And finally, so you have the whole context, and also given the limited time that we have with Kirat today, I do encourage you to go back and listen to the podcast that was out in 2021, Sweet Bobby, on Spotify. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Kirat, welcome to the podcast. And I'm really sorry, this is the third time we're about to be recording at the same place in the same studio.
Oh no, thank you for having me, and apologise, it's just like home now, isn't it? So
this is like home. Well, I'm really, really grateful for your time today. I was saying to Priyal, who's sitting in the background, that last year when the documentary came out, I did try to reach out to you. And then turns out, fast forward to this year, we get to speak. So really grateful for your time and for trusting me and so many other people with your story. We definitely want to hear more of you and to have your say. Can I start by wishing you happy birthday?
Oh, thank you. It was last week, and it's your birthday soon.
Tomorrow.
Are
you Pisces?
Yes, I am.
Hey, okay. Well, I'm really excited that it was your birthday, but also that you are going on a solo trip tomorrow. How exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I don't know where I'm going yet. I think I've worked it out, but yeah, it should be nice.
You did say it might be Malta.
It might be. I think it is, but let's see.
Okay.
Let's see.
Do let us know.
I will.
Anyway, look, I've prefaced this by saying and urging people to go and listen to the podcast that came out. My intention and the way I want to adopt this conversation is not to go into details and have you to retell the story, but rather to hear and maybe take the time to ask questions that we as audience viewers may have had. And now that we have you in the room, we get to hear from yourself. Well, I listened to a podcast where it was your friend and host Raj Panda who had you on the podcast, and I listened to it, and then before she chatted to you, she spoke so highly of you, and she was telling basically us listeners about your energy, how goofy and giggly you are, like all your hobbies and things that you're interested in. And then she went on saying how she had no idea about everything that was happening in your life. So I do want to ask, while it seemed throughout the documentary that Simran, your cousin, knew a lot about what was going on in your personal life, your colleagues and friends were people you spent a lot of time with. Was there a reason why you kept all of this to yourself and maybe didn't really share with them?
So Raj isn't somebody who, she's not like a best friend or anything. So she's not somebody I would regularly call and speak to.
Right.
She's known me for a long time. I was speaking to people, so my colleagues at work knew what was going on. So we were talking about it. But like I said, the first few years of the whole deception, it wasn't where I was involved. It was more like me going back at work and going, oh my God, this happened with these guys. Oh my God, how crazy is this? It was like a little soap that was playing out almost. I go back in at work and we just update what happened kind of thing. I hadn't bought into the scenario right from the beginning. So it was just, like, how can one person have such bad luck? That would be the topic of conversation. But, right at the beginning, it wasn't about anything. You just like, that's so-and-so's nephew, and he reached out to me, and that's it. There's no more than that. I'm not somebody who sort of like somebody reaches out to you that you vaguely know and you say hi and something to him. It's not like, it's not sort of like, you don't dwell on it, do you? It's just, okay.
But when you were talking to maybe other friends who you were closer to, did anyone at any point say, this seems a bit fishy, like you might want to have a video call with that person? Bearing in mind that this was 10 years ago, right? Today, it's a lot different. If I'm going to be speaking to someone online, I'm sure my friends will be like, at some point, you're going to have to get on a call with that person. But then I think we need to almost like remind the audience as well that we're talking like 10, 15 years ago. That wasn't a thing then.
Video calls weren't a thing. And when they became a thing slowly during that period, at the beginning of that period, we weren't allowed to have a video call because of the situation in the hospital. But when he came out of the situation in the hospital and was still in New York, I tried. So it's not like I didn't try. And when things weren't working, I lost my temper. But again, you have to remember this was so many years in. So it's like who would, like, the family, this, we've been talking to lots of people. It's not just a one-on-one thing. All the other people that were talking to this fake person in my circle, they could have all asked for a video call. They could have all, it's like anybody could have done that. But we all knew who that person was. So, and because I had met him in person a few years before, it's like we know exactly who that person was. And that person seemed to know exactly what was going on with everything. So the mixture of the truth in this scenario just complicated it. Having a cousin who was seeing me in real life, who knew them and was filling me in on stuff. There were incidents where I was bumping into bits of their family and kind of checking little things, and I'd be constantly like, the relationship took a turn.
Right.
So that relationship I thought he was going to die. So I didn't think that relationship was going to be what it was. It was just a sort of a dying man's wish, really. And I wasn't ready to be in another relationship as such. And I didn't think that anything was going to come of it because he was in palliative care at the time. And I'd been told he wasn't going to survive. So then when he survived because of this medical trial that he'd been on and a few things, and I'm now in a position where like, okay, I've got to deal with this. But there was like kind of this weird honeymoon period then, and then come October 2016, it took its, like, I asked for counselling at work because it had taken a mental toll looking after somebody who'd been unwell from abroad. But things then from his side of the family got difficult. So it put a lot of pressure on us, not on the relationship as such, but like just a lot of stress to take. And then following year, July 2016, was when all the nastiness started, when I literally started losing it. So it was very, like, there's two key points where it started getting really, really like bad and then worse.
Right.
And yeah, from those points onwards, it becomes very difficult to, from the second point on, I would say that's when the sort of narcissistic covert abuse kicked in. And I wasn't getting it from one person. I was getting it from this family of people. Right. So it's not a one-on-one thing. I was talking to several people and each one was verifying things, including my own cousin in real life, who was my cousin, right?
So it was somewhat validating some of the things that you may have been feeling, but...
So if I was doubting something, and I voiced my doubt, everybody else more than one person would validate or vouch for it. So you're thinking, so I'd be gaslit. So I was being, okay, this can't be right. No, but no, you've got it wrong. And somebody else would then correct me as like, you've got it wrong this time. And then another person would be like, I think you really got the wrong end of the stick. So I'm like, oh, I've got it wrong. Whereas I was so sure of myself, and I'm somebody who's quite sure, I dig my heels in a lot. It was about slowly breaking me down. And it is, narcissistic abuse is a gradual thing. It's not something that just suddenly snaps.
And that's really important that you highlight it. It's a gradual thing. When we think about this case in particular, it's a case of manipulation on an epic scale, really. Can I take you back to the podcast, right? It was released by Tortoise Media in 2021, if I'm not wrong.
That's right, yeah.
How did it come about to get to know about your story? And why did you say yes to bringing this out to the public?
So it wasn't a choice. It wasn't something I pitched. My whole thing was just to help people through that, like having a civil case, which would help other people, or having the police case, which didn't happen, hence the civil case. But my witness statement was leaked. That source wasn't me. Otherwise, he would have said, Kirat handed me a document. I wasn't pitching for anything.
Mm-hmm.
There was always the chance that, we know because it'd gone through the civil court and been filed to court, that there is a chance that somebody would pick it up and it would become a thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was always that vague chance, but you have to know where to look. And, it's only journalists that really know where to look when they're looking for stories like that. But yeah, you have to know. You wouldn't just find it as a normal person, as a lay person. So it wasn't a case of me pitching it to anybody and wanting to do this. But when somebody else has got it, that story is so crazy that it's going to get told. And it's a case of, well, it needs to be told properly. Am I going to go and let somebody just tell it how they want to tell it? Or am I going to let somebody in, correct them, make sure that it gets fact checked, it gets told not sensationally because the story is crazy enough, and let them in and have sight of the evidence as well, because otherwise they won't have sight of anything if I don't do it with them. So that was the reason.
What feels very real is the catfishing. The catfishing, which is, if we were to Google up the definition, that would be the fabrication of a fake online identity. What's interesting, at least to us, like this millennial of this generation of millennials and Gen Z, catfishing is a term we know about very, very casually, right? And especially when it comes to online dating. But if we go back to 10, 15 years ago, the term catfishing wasn't there at all. Like, I looked it up, and apparently the very first time it came into the public light was really when the show Catfish came out, 2012. And I'm not even sure it's officially recognized as a cybercrime in so many countries, including the UK.
It's not. There are countries, Japan has, I think, and there's a couple of other countries that are beginning to do that, and certain states are looking at, in the US are looking at it. And more in terms of prosecution to have, initially I was like, no, if the laws exist, the police have said laws exist in which to prosecute somebody, then we should work within that framework to do that.
Right.
But if it's so difficult to do, maybe we need to make it easier to be able to do and have the catfishing law for that reason. And I don't want to call it catfishing because even that term, what it meant 3 years ago when the podcast came out to what it means now, people just use it so loosely. It's like, it's online fraud, it's online, for me it was entrapment. It's online deception in any way, shape or form for some kind of gain or some kind of harm. We need to have the right term for it. But anything that uses the internet to weaponize, when you weaponize the internet against people or individuals, that's a crime.
What fascinates me is that it seems like in the UK, the reason why it hasn't been recognised yet as a cybercrime is that the UK Malicious Act, which goes back to 1988 or 2003, seems to be outdated. We're now in 2025. So take a guess as to when it might be legally recognised. We don't know. But it's interesting that you when you say you would rather maybe now call it a different term other than catfishing, because yes, seems to be, these days we kind of loosely use the term catfishing. I got catfished by someone when I went on that online date. Seems to be something that's a bit taken more lightly.
Yeah, just because they didn't look like how they looked in their picture, but it's still the same person. That's different, isn't it?
It's different.
So that's not really, yeah. So it's a term that just gets used so loosely, and I think we do that with clinical terms as well now. We just like, narcissism's another one, triggers another one. Loads of these words we use as and when they become public knowledge of what these terms are, they just get bandied about, and it's quite dangerous because it really minimizes the essence of what really goes on.
Right. Look, Kirat, like I was saying in the pre-chat before we started recording, after you've been on so many podcasts, which I think is really brave of you to come out and still address like questions that we viewers may still have. I spent so much time browsing through Reddit and so many other platforms, making sure I tried to get maybe the gist of the questions that people still have. And one of the questions that has come up many times is, when you look back at this series of 8-9 years and you try to take a moment and pause, do you think there was any, what we would call as red flags these days, right? But do you think there was any signs there where this could have been your moment to say, this needs to stop, and this is clearly something that I've got myself entrapped in, and this is the moment for me to snap out of it?
Okay, so firstly, hindsight's such a wonderful thing, right? Everyone can say everything in hindsight, but again, you have to be living in it to know and understand what was going on. For what people don't understand is how abusive it was. So I was like a size 0. I wasn't allowed to do anything for myself. I was having to ask permission to even go to the bathroom sometimes. Every little thing I did was known to the other person, and I'd got to the point where I felt guilty if I hid anything as well. But I've always been a very open person, but I was walking on eggshells constantly. And there was also, because the other people were being talked to and I was talking to people, and it was just, I was isolated. I wasn't allowed to talk to people, and other people that were being talked to were being fed something different to me, and I was the bad one. I was the angry one. So I knew things but were going on. You're kind of being bullied and emotionally blackmailed, and you're on edge, and it's about survival. You're surviving, even though I knew something was wrong, and I was trying. The only benefit I had was that he couldn't see me all the time. What I thought, that's why I use that word. He couldn't see me all the time, and there were times when I was like, but the thing is, it'd gone on so long that I needed that person to come and face me face to face. So even if it wasn't going to work, I needed to get him here in the UK and face me.
Right.
And be held to account for everything that he had done. So I had my gut feeling. I never thought it was not the same person because of all the different verification and all the different stuff, but I knew something was wrong. And I'd been investigating quietly myself. I'd been checking things. Even though I'd been told to come off social media, my gut feeling told me things were wrong on certain days, like
by who?
Days.
Like your parents and family? Like to come off social media?
By Bobby.
Okay.
Right? So because I'd find things online, and he was like, why are you looking? Well, he was like, and then there was that whole trolling my account and accusing me of things that I'd not done, and all sorts. It was just abuse, literally abuse. So that nice honeymoon period had gone, but it was hot and cold as well. So any victim of, and mine obviously was covert narcissistic abuse, but it was 2 levels. It was this person abusing me with the help of their family as well, which was the overt bit, if it was that real person. But the fact that somebody else is doing that and pretending to be all those people and abusing me through those people is another layer of it. And the level and the extent that it went to was crazy. It's been the only groups that helped me, the only people and kind of tribes that I found were online groups for narcissistic abuse. And only people, even though I couldn't explain exactly what had gone on in my scenario, it was only those people in those groups that really truly understand. And even now I say the same. No one can truly understand what that abuse is like. It's so cruel. There aren't really words to explain. I tried to do this with somebody else a few weeks ago, somebody who's in my corner, but hasn't been through it. And I'm like, I've read them something and I said, look, this is somebody else who's been through what I've been through. I get it. But you still don't get what that person's been through, but I get it. And I understand how crazy and awful and how deeply impacting it is. It is very hard to understand. So we do band together, and when people just say things like, yeah, you're a narcissist, you're an arc, it's not as easy as that. It is very debilitating.
Right.
So when you talk about looking back and seeing what you could have done, the fact that I was even able to try and, there was times we were on a Skype call and I was trying to find out where that Skype call was coming from. So I'd look up how to work out where that Skype call was coming from. And while he would be on the call with me, I'd be like trying to search where it's coming from, where's I'd be doing crazy things like that. I was like, I don't trust that he's where he is where he said he is. I didn't think he wasn't him, but I did think he was lying or something's not right. Someone's not telling me the truth. I didn't, because there were so many of them.
Right.
It's very difficult.
I hear you. And I think I really appreciate the fact that you say no one else might be able to understand the story fully because you went through it, you lived that. Do you think like you've made peace with the fact that people will never be able to 100% understand what really happened? There will always be people out there. Like we've seen the backlash after the Netflix documentary came out. And it's divided the internet, right? And there are some people, again, maybe going back to Reddit, which might not be the best source, but my intention is I really want to give you the platform to clear the narrative. This is your story to tell. When some people say, Kirat maybe should have reflected on her own responsibility or her own accountability in the story, what do you've got to say to that? Is there anything you could have done differently at all?
Well, like I said, in hindsight, you can always go back and be like, I wish I'd done this differently. I wish I'd spoken to my dad about this. I wish I'd pushed my cousin more for the address, or I wish I'd got out of my car and actually spoken to Sanj that time. All these other things which would have done it. If I wish I'd had the guts to speak to the family, wish I'd pushed this bit a bit further. There's always those, those things, but then you've got the cultural aspect where, it's family and you have to think about that too. Like I said, being abused in the way that I was being abused is debilitating, and not many people, if you ask, it's like so many people ask victims, and you get victims of domestic abuse being asked this all the time. Why didn't you just walk away from that situation?
Right.
You've got to understand the pressure that victim is under. If you speak to other victims of domestic abuse and domestic violence, walking away is sometimes more harmful than staying in it. It's easier to stay in it than walking away. And for people that don't understand that, I'm sorry I'm sorry you don't understand that, but also count yourself really lucky, is what I'm going to say. And of course, nobody is ever going to know my story fully. Because it's going to take a long time to tell you. The initial podcast is like probably the best version of that story. I don't know how they told it so well. They did an amazing job. The documentary probably less so, because they've tried to condense it. And in doing so, they've missed out key aspects in trying to break it down.
How do you condense 9 years in that many minutes of a documentary?
Yeah, and it's not me speaking throughout all of it either. And so it's going to be that way. But if people want to comment, before you comment, have a little Google, find the podcast, listen to the podcast too. It's like I said, we have a responsibility ourselves to not judge. If I was to knock on anyone's door and start prying into people's lives, I'm sure I can find skeletons and mistakes that everybody's made. We're all human. And I have, this has happened to me. It happens to people all the time to a lesser degree. And we all know about it. And so when the civil case happened and I was talking to the lawyer, and he's an internet lawyer, so he sees this stuff all the time.
Right.
So he hasn't seen it to the degree of what happened to me, but he was like, it happens all the time. And I'm like, well, I haven't done anything stupid, in the sense that I haven't given any money to anybody. I haven't taken, I haven't shared any nudes or any dodgy videos. Or I haven't done anything like that. I haven't shared any private details, or I've been so careful about what I give.
Right.
And what I shared, even if he was my partner, I refused to do certain things. I wouldn't give my passwords. And I was asked for them. I was asked for my access to certain social media and stuff, and I refused to give them.
But even when you look up the stats, like I think even the UK Finance, I may have seen this quite recently, over 25% of people in the last 12 months, when it comes to online dating, right? Over 25% of people have said they have been a victim of catfishing. And I know you hate the term today, but so many people have been victims of catfishing, either, as you say, either for finance reasons or romantic reasons. It is happening, and it's going to be even harder with artificial intelligence, with technology. It's going to be hard to pin down people.
Oh, absolutely. AI is just a whole new world. And I dread to think if AI was around in 2009, what the situation would have been for me then. And it happens, but why are we stopped from speaking about it? You know, we do everything online. And I say this over and over again, like you laugh about it. You know, how many of you are on dating apps? I had never even been on a dating app at that point. So I wasn't even looking for love. Right. You know, in that first couple of years, I was in 2 different relationships before this one even happened. So it wasn't a case of, I wasn't worried about those kind of accusations because I wasn't a girl online looking for love, desperate for this, desperate for that. I had a life. I had a very busy life. I am one of those people who just throws myself into things. And the internet and the social media world is not my world. Right. As in, I have always been cynical about it. And that's why I'm guessing it took such a long time to get the buy-in, because I never believed conversations online were legitimate until you meet somebody, right? Mm-hmm. But this was family. So that kind of half legitimized it. And then the fact that I had to be convinced that now that was the new norm. Like even WhatsApp messages, I was like, still until you actually have a conversation. Now everyone thinks messaging is fine. Yeah. But when this started, messaging wasn't fine. You talk to people. And I still talk to people, but I had to be convinced that this was the normal way of doing things. And now everybody's like, oh no, now you've got to make it real again. You know, it's like, wow, society really does tell us what the right and wrong is, you know, whereas I've always had my own mind. So yeah, I mean, even now when I do video calls from home, I do them from one place in the house. There's nothing that reveals too much about me in a video call. And I've always been that way. I've always been that cautious. Whereas you see people online, especially in COVID. Oh my God, things people were sharing online during COVID was crazy. Like it all just went out of the window. Like what happened to your own safety and your family's safety? And so yeah, before people say things, they really need to stop, reflect, and actually sort of, if there's stuff out there, like I said, the podcast existed, do your homework before you comment. Don't be so eager to comment. What is the need to comment? As in, I don't think a decent human being doesn't go on there and just say nasty things about people.
100%.
It's not okay. Would you say that to my face?
Whoever said, if you've got nothing nice to say, just don't say anything at all, was right in his mind.
That's fine. But I've got to be fair. After the podcast, there were doubters. There were, you know, I wouldn't call them trolls, but the way they approached things was, you know, there were questions, and I was happy to always like respond back. And I responded, I think, pretty much to as many as I could, tackling their doubts and their kind of negativity about me. And we had healthy, open discussions, and they're in the public domain. Lots of them were actually on Twitter. What was Twitter? It's X now. But and you know, I've not shied away of dealing with the difficult questions. And there was a bonus episode we did with Tortoise as well, which took the public's questions and they sent them to me, and I had a whole episode which is on their platform, where I just answered loads of questions, filling in all the gaps. Right. And the fact that I have got answers for what happened, for, you know, like people, why did you do this? Why did you? Well, there is a reason. There's always a logical reason. Because I'm quite a logical, rational person. There is a logical, rational reason for why I would have done something the way that I did. And even if I say it's because of this is how it's done in our community, that's rational, because people in my community would understand that. The wider society might not, but all of us in our community might understand that that's not the way we do things.
This is such an important point. The South Asian community and the Punjabi Sikh community, do you think that this did play a large part in the wider narrative? So to put that into context, if we were to talk about matchmaking and family introductions, right? It is a thing. Like, I'm originally from the island of Mauritius. If you were to suggest like someone meet up with someone else, as a potential someone, it's not going to be frowned upon. Obviously, no one's forcing someone to get married to whoever, but it's not going to be frowned upon. I could have my auntie saying, hey, I know someone in Canada. Like, would you want to have a call? Right? That, to me, is not something that I would find really unusual. Obviously, I'd be like, that person is in the same country. Like, what are we doing here? But I wouldn't mind having a call, right? Yeah. Nothing unusual. I might say this to my white Caucasian friend who'd be like, why will I even want to think about starting an online long distance thing with someone? Like, what is this, right? So I'm trying to put that into context for people to see where we're going with this. Do you think, coming from a Punjabi Sikh community where everyone knows each other, I'm from a South Asian community, and I know, like, if I were to suggest whoever to someone else, they'd be like, oh, I might know of him, or my second cousin, something. Do you think that kind of made it a bit more legitimate in the sense, like, as you say, we know each other, or the community is involved? Did that play a large part in the wider narrative?
I think it did, but also the fact that I think I don't know if this played a part in it, but I'm quite traditional, but in so many ways I'm not as well.
Okay.
So I didn't like that whole introduction thing that you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't for me, because I always felt like that's being shopped for.
Okay.
And I always felt like I was on somebody's shopping list, and
nice.
A family introduction would be like, yeah, she does this, she's from this kind of family, she's this, all those kind of got this job, earns well, all those, it felt like a tick list. Like,
right.
And that's like being on a dating app, which I hate as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like shopping for somebody, and I didn't want to be shopped for. So I've always been that kind of like stood up for myself and not wanted to do that. And I've had a couple forced on me, and I was like, because it's people, unless it's somebody who you're really close to who introduces you to somebody, there's less chance of like success when somebody really doesn't know you, or doesn't know all aspects of you well.
Mm-hmm.
But I was led to believe, like, maybe if I did things the right way and through family and did all that it would be better. And this was like the whole thing, that I was being kind of manipulated to think that maybe I had taken the wrong approach.
Okay.
And that's why I was unsuccessful so far, that kind of thing. And I don't think that's fair. But yeah, so I was kind of being made to feel like by not following the cultural norm, or like a said way of doing things, that was the reason why I was possibly not married yet. And it was kind of trying to push me to feel like that. And it was, I was beginning to kind of, because it was being pushed from so many people, and that narrative was kind of like, maybe I started to question myself, like, should I be doing it this way? This would be good because our families know each other. Mm-hmm. We know, there's right. That whole safety of like somebody knowing the other family as well. That's another reason for it in our culture, that we call them vijolan, that middle person, that if something goes wrong, that's the person that deals with the disputes and the resolutions and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's all that kind of weird stuff, and weird stuff to everybody else, but which is so normal in our community. And what I found since the podcast is every community has their own subculture. We all have our own subcultures. So ours might be this, but in the Black community it might be that. Mm-hmm. Philippine community might be that. In the Chinese community it might be that. But the wider society doesn't understand the subcultures and the norms, what's normal behavior and accepted behavior in the subcultures. And so the wider society is judging us by their standards. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, these minority groups, these subcultures are under pressure to uphold their community's reputation in that wider society. Mm. So you're also under that pressure of like, I can't do this because it will bring shame to my community. I can't ruin the reputation of my community. So you carry that burden for the rest of your community if you do something wrong, or if there's something that should I talk about this? Should I not talk about this? What will wider society think of our whole community? And we get it in the media all the time. Like somebody does something wrong, a person of colour, the whole community is tarnished with that brush. And that's not a subculture's fault. That's not a minority group's fault. That's society at large doing that. And so you have that pressure from outside, but then you have the pressure from inside. So it's like a dual thing. When really we shouldn't feel like that.
How has this shaped your thinking when it comes to long distance relationship? And if I may push it, to brown men in general?
Hasn't had any impact at all. I think the healthy way to think about it was that was one person that did something crazy and awful, and not everybody is that person. And almost like, when you have a bad marriage or a bad relationship, you end that. You have to look at it that way. Mine might have been particularly bad. You've got to heal and you've got to move forward. And that's my responsibility, because that person's not going to do that for me. I have to do that. Nobody's going to do that for me. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. So whatever's happened, and that person needs to be accountable for themselves. Life would be so much easier if that person for me just held up their hands and said, something, I did this.
Right.
Instead of trying to fight it all the time. But you don't know, like, that person's not been held to account. And it's not okay for people to get away with it. And it's not okay for us to let people get away with it. I'm not the only victim in my scenario. I'm the only one that's spoken.
Yes.
Right? We already know from the podcast that Bobby's brother was a victim, real version. We also know there's been another victim. In the podcast, you hear that she'd done it at school before me.
Let's get to this person, because I feel like this is the elephant in the room that we haven't addressed as part of the podcast yet. And Simran, your cousin. To start with, can I ask you, does it bother you that the documentary was called Sweet Bobby and not, I don't know, Deceived by Simran or Kirat's Nightmare? The fact that we gave so much importance to Bobby through the title when the story is about you. Did that ever cross your mind at all? It did cross mind, so I do wonder.
So the title for the documentary came from the podcast. They used the initial podcast same name. I didn't have any, like, that wasn't my say. I had nothing to do with the name.
Of course.
I'd laughed and was like, it should have been, and I think somebody else suggested it as well. It should have been called Bobby Trap. But it was, it is what it's called. I mean, I don't know. It's called that possibly because of some of the I don't know why they called it that. I think maybe because of the nicknames we used for each other, or like how whatever, or something like that. I don't know. But the podcast makers, that team, decided to call it Sweet Bobby. And hence the documentary followed with that name, which I had suggested, let's change it. But no.
What would you have liked it to be changed to? Bearing your name or not really?
It doesn't need to be bearing my name or anything like that. I mean, it doesn't bother me so much. But like, it's about being trapped for me. It was about, like I said, I call it online entrapment. And reflecting that would have been better. But obviously, as telling a story, if you want to do it, it's like, yeah, this person's really sweet. And it's about that manipulation, I guess. But no, that doesn't, the title doesn't, it's like a very small thing in a very big, but yeah.
Okay. Simran, from what we know, had a very busy, well-achieved professional life. She was working in banking. I work in banking, and let's put that into context. It's hectic, it's long hours, it's a busy schedule. Back in the days, today you can obviously log in on your phone. You're at your desk, you might be checking Instagram, Facebook through your phone. Back then, you had to be logged in through your desktop, through your computer. From what we know, she had created so many profiles. Help us understand how did she find the time to do all of this? Because for me, I still can't grasp it.
I can't grasp it either, but that's a question that only she can answer, because that's something I'd like to know as well, to be honest. Because I think we all deserve, like, I think all of us as society, as public, need to know how these things can happen. Like with AI now, we might be able to explain it, but that wasn't the case then. And if somebody with that kind of mental capacity to do something like that, how far could they go with AI? It's terrifying, and I think we all have a right.
And it wasn't work from home. Like you had to be in the office all the time.
She was. So you got to understand, this started back in 2009. She would have only been 17. So in that period, she's gone to university, then she's had another job, and then she ended up in that job that you've just spoken about.
Thank you, that's helpful.
So that's, yeah. So there's like a timeline in what was going on in her life. But yeah, she would have been busy for the amount of time that was spent. It doesn't make sense. And it didn't make sense to me when I say this, is that I don't know how somebody was able to be on the other end of a phone with me at the same time every day. And that was the only thing that was like, well, no matter what happens, he's on the phone with me. It's like, no, if not a few times a day, or if not all day or most of the day, it was definitely all night, every night. Like, it became a habit after the hospital situation to have just the phone line open. And I think after a while, it was making sure that I was at home and keeping me in my place. I do feel like if I didn't answer a call, I always felt, and anybody in a domestic abuse and violence situation will understand this, that if I didn't answer that call, it was always like, why didn't you answer my call? What were you doing? Where were you? Initially, when I wouldn't put it on video call, it was like, I did think it would, like, just for 2 minutes, and I always felt like I didn't say it because I knew it would cause an issue, but I always felt like it was to make sure that I was in my room, that I hadn't gone anywhere, that I hadn't done anything different. I am sitting where I said I would be. It would only, even because I'd be like, you haven't put yours on, I'm not putting mine on. So when people say, like, why didn't you? I did, but his never worked. And I didn't believe after a while that it didn't work. I made him try it on different devices. And then when his brother said it didn't work, I just didn't believe it at all. But then by then it was like too deep into the nastiness.
Right.
I wasn't believing things, I was doubting things, but I wasn't in a position to get myself out of there safely, I felt. And that's the thing, I didn't feel safe.
Right.
It was like you're always threatened, like the internet is the community side of it, the family side of it. You don't know what's going to happen. And then to, like, the amount of information that other person had on me, about me, by this time, you want to be very clear on, like, where you stand or what will happen if I call it a day now, and how can I trust that person? So you need to make sure, like, you're trapped. You're absolutely trapped.
And you mentioned during the podcast as well that at some point you stopped going to community events, but that she was still carrying on with her life.
You're talking about after?
After.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So at the beginning, obviously during the whole thing I did. Towards the end, I lost contact with so many people.
But do you guys live, or I don't know what's the case now, but were you living in the same neighbourhood?
With,
like, you and Simran?
No, we don't, not too far from each other at that time, so the distance wasn't too far.
Right.
But yeah, we cross paths in community, and like there's overlaps in communities, and community's so small, you learn things all the time, and people say things to me. Just yesterday, I had to do some work, and I invited somebody, like, for some work, I invited somebody to something, and the person said to me, "Oh, can I invite my partner along?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm not sure there's space, but I think let me sort it out for you." And I asked, because I had asked what she did and whatever, and I was like, "Yeah, I think that would work. That we can invite them." And it's like, I just need to be very clear with you. This person, I know your story. This person knew your perpetrator, and I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. It's a small world. It's okay.
Right.
But that happens to me often. And if I decided to react to all these things, and it like I couldn't move forward. But initially it was like I stopped going because I was feeling intimidated by that person.
Because she was still going.
Well, yeah, it was a case of, it was like, if you think about it, she's destroyed. Like, I was on a really good trajectory. And for anyone, like, everyone always has something going wrong in their life at some point, one aspect. And everything's never hunky-dory. There's always something that could be better. But generally, I was in a good place.
Right.
Work, everything, looking forward to stuff, kind of things were going well, partner, everything was going pretty decently. And she destroyed all of that, right? And you've got now like a 39, 40-year-old woman after the confession. And then you've got a much younger, very successful young woman who's got the world, like, she could have anything that she wanted, and she is a success story. Like, I held her in such high regard myself as I was so proud of her, and that's how everybody saw her. We were all so proud of her, as far as I could see. Even like people who went to school with her, and one of my cousins was in her class, and it just, we held her in such high regard. So me coming out of what I came out of, and it was deliberately concocted. Yeah, this is again part of how narcissistic abuse works. Is like the victim looks stupid. It's made, the whole situation's manipulated so nobody believes the victim.
Because what I haven't seen so far, Kirat, and sorry to cut you there, I haven't seen, or I'm yet to see, any single reaction from the community, like the Sikh Punjabi community. I haven't seen anyone, and I may have missed out, but I haven't seen anyone who's come out and said, yes, like the perpetrator, let's talk about her, right? Like, and that to me is quite fascinating. Like, as you say, it's almost like victim shaming, but we haven't seen people necessarily, and I'm sure like there's so many people out there not condoning the fact that she's done this, but I haven't really seen any explicit reaction saying or trying to hold her accountable.
Yeah, that is, and that's a tough thing. And for me, I think everybody finds that difficult, and I think I question ourselves, and I question, as in society, the way we've become. But I question people who, I've said it to people who talk to me about faith, and I'm like, well, I might not be the perfect Sikh, but I always say, at the end of the day, my faith means a lot to me. My faith's carried me through stuff, and one of the ultimate things about our faith is standing up for the truth. Even if you're alone, you stand up for the truth and fight for, against injustice. And so I'm doing that. And if you're being quiet, but don't preach to me, I say to people, don't preach to me about Sikh if you can't stand with me on this one.
Right.
If you can't say this is wrong, we need to, it doesn't matter if that, like this is what happens when I was talking to you earlier about the minority groups and things like that. Because the judgment of wider society, we want to hold out, like we're scared to hold people in our own community to account for fear of what the wider society will say about our community. And that's where that problem starts. What we need to do is, I feel like minority communities need to do is say, look, we have systems in place to make our own person, to hold our own person to account and show that we are responsible members of the wider society by doing that. But I don't know why, it's like what things look like still. It goes back to that, what things will look like and that fear of judgment. But we need to stand together and do the right thing. And it is about doing the right thing, isn't it? So
I guess we'll never find out, as you say, we'll never find out why she did that. But after the podcast and after the documentary, I know you're not in touch with her, but have you crossed paths like in London somehow? Like, is she in the UK?
As far as I know, yeah. I mean, but I haven't, and I don't really want to either.
You haven't seen her at all, even from far? Wow.
No, I mean, I have some of the family, but not her. And I don't even know how I'd feel if I saw her. And that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to. I don't know what my reaction would be. I haven't seen her since the confession, and I don't intend see her ever again, hopefully.
From what we know, she was engaged, and apparently her engagement broke just before the podcast was meant to come out.
That's right, as far as I know, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you this question, and it might seem uncomfortable. So many speculations have been thrown out there that she probably did it out of jealousy, sadism, narcissism. We agree with those terms, but that she probably did it out of jealousy. There's been claims that maybe she could have felt somewhat romantic towards you. There's been so many allegations out there and speculations. I'm not asking you to obviously pinpoint which one it would be, and who knows what was going on in her head. But is there anything of these, including the fact that she may have felt somewhat romantic towards you? Is there anything at all when it comes to these different speculations that you would completely discard and refute, or you leave it out there as who knows?
I mean, I like, again, I can't speak for what that person did and why they did it. And I know there's like, yeah, even after the podcast, there was all this speculation. But now I know like there were further victims as well. I totally discard the one that she might have had any romantic interest in me, which is like sickening in just thinking about, because that's just like, sorry, that's just sick. But I discard that because I think my greatest concern, and it worries me that they're not concerned, is her fascination with Bobby and Bobby's family, and the fact that she actually, you know, had all this set up before, like, she even started doing this to me. She would have been obviously following their family for a long time, and the fact that I only learned during the making of the podcast that she didn't date him at school, that she dated him after. I only learned that afterwards, because when Bobby speaks in the podcast is when we learned that. I didn't know that until that point. When we were making the podcast, when I came out of the civil case, I had that whole thing in my head that she must have dated him in first love at school, gone wrong, and it's just snowballed out of that. That's how I always thought it had been. And it wasn't until we heard from Bobby during the making of the podcast that we learned that wasn't true. She actually dated him after. So, you know, anything that I had in my head, like any theories, everything had been, thrown out of the water. That podcast opened a whole, just like the number of people that approached, I think, Alexi at Tortoise and me separately as well, with what they knew and their own experiences and stuff. It's kind of blown theories that were had out of the water, because it's like, I just thought it was a reasonable explanation. First love gone wrong. You know, we're like, girls get a little bit besotted and they do silly things, and this, she got herself into a little predicament with this one, not realizing this went far beyond just me. So that, like, I don't think that whole romantic thing, knowing there's another victim who is, third victim's female as well, closer to her than I was. I don't think she had feelings for her or me or whatever. I don't know what her fascination with sort of the Bobby and Bobby's side of the family was, because she knew everything about them and about lots of other people as well, which is scary. So I kind of, that's kind of like her being a lesbian and that kind of rhetoric that's been passed around. I don't necessarily agree with that. But I don't know what is the truth. We can sit here and discuss this till the cows come home. We're not going to know. The only person that knows is that person. Yeah.
And what about Bobby? I know you said on the podcast that, and I might be paraphrasing this, so I do apologize. These might not be your words, might not have been your words, but you did share somewhat of a regret for him not having maybe had further discussions with you after you had the encounter where he found out about this whole almost fraud and manipulation that had been going on. But after you had that encounter and you left from their place, it almost felt like you had a regret, or you were a bit disappointed that there was no follow-up or him trying to find out. I don't know if you knew that he was going to be part of the Netflix documentary. Do you somehow still feel that maybe Bobby and Sanj owe you something, whether that's trying to understand what happened or trying to help find answers to what happened?
I've always tried to do the right thing. And when all of this came to light, I had a responsibility firstly to myself I had to separate in my head the fake Bobby versus the real Bobby. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't have that conversation directly myself because I had a responsibility to myself to put my head right in the sense that you can't have yourself slipping into thinking that person I'm talking to in real life is that person, because it'd be very easy to do that. I had to give myself enough separation from that situation. And like I said, I'm not like stupid in that sense. I'm very rational, logical, and I know that needed to be done for my own self. Mm-hmm. I needed to not ever slip into that feeling that was the person I was talking to, or that I knew him because I'd been talking to him online. That's, I didn't know him like that. Mm-hmm. So I had to give myself that separation. And also in terms of being official, I didn't want to be the person chasing. It had to either come from an official source, like the police or whoever it was going to be, or from, I felt like, elders in the family.
Right.
In that period, in that initial period. What I found shocking was that they didn't seem to, I did think they didn't know the extent of it initially. But when we tried to reach out to them to share the extent, I was, it bothers me that people don't want to know like how many of their personal pictures I have.
Right.
Like, why would you not want to know what's been shared about you and how much you're stalked? But I do feel like there's also a sense of in our community, and this is what I'm going to go back to, that for me, they are part of that community. They're not the ones that speak out. They've done for me, they've done the safe stuff and not tried to be not question, not do anything. They've just told their little bit in the documentary, which has had wider reach, but not shared concerns, not shared that kind of stuff. And, they were being stalked. Their whole family was being stalked, impersonated, and that bothers me. But what bothers me is not worrying about it or just pretending that it didn't happen. That a lot of that happens in our community.
And maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but do you think there could be a case where they are actually intrigued, they are actually worried about how the pictures were leaked, but maybe they are trying to mentally protect themselves? I don't know. They have a baby, so do you think there's part of them was like, they know they're going to be opening themselves to the whole world and to the scrutiny of the public eye, but let's rather be in our bubble and mentally protect ourselves? Could that be something? While they might deeply care about wanting to know what really happened.
I think there's been enough attempts to approach them from my side, to understand if that's the case. And personally, what I feel is like, no. That it is, I still feel like they've become for me part of the issue of the community element of it.
Okay.
Where we brush things under the carpet and let's not talk about it, and we'll only do the bits that are safe to do. Let's not do the things that are difficult to do. And that's how I feel. And I feel sad because the more people that speak up about these things, the more strength there is in that unity, the strength in numbers. So I was I understood they were doing the documentary, and I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. That's just not me speaking now. That's another person that's going to speak to what happened and what the shock and craziness of it all. But when I watched the documentary, it was like they've only spoken about me turning up to the front door and scaring them. Why is the rest of it not in there? So I was a bit I was quite angry actually about that, because you've thrown me under the bus because you've let. I feel like everyone's benefited, but I've been the front person. So they would have never found out they were being stalked if it hadn't been for me speaking. Or, people wouldn't have found out things had I not spoken up.
Right. Did you share your disappointment with them, or after the...
How do I share the disappointment if they don't want to speak to me? And that's another thing that I find quite strange. But it's fine. At the end of the day, I mean, he's again, if people listen to the podcast, they will hear what he has to say there. It's just not in the documentary. And like I said, you know, they're not, again, I don't know what her fascination was with their family. But, you know, again, they're not the only victims. There's another victim, and there's potentially another victim as well who thinks that person did it to them as well. So it's just, you don't know where it stops. And that's why I think we need to hold that person to account.
100%. I've got last 3 questions for you. One of the striking moments in the podcast for me was when you talk about the letter of apology that you received from Simran. And that is a letter that you can't be sharing with the outside world, but you did show it to your dad. And you mentioned that he seemed a bit casual about it, or maybe he listened to it but didn't have much to say. Now that this has come out and he can see the reaction from viewers, from listeners, how's the relationship with the family when it comes to this specific narrative? And have you had conversations with your dad about this particular moment when he got to see the apology letter that would have validated this whole situation, but he kind of brushed it off? Does he look back at it and sort of maybe regret? Or is that still very much his stance, like, let's move on from this?
You've got to remember, like, he was kind of he was ambushed to read that letter at that moment. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, in that sort of shock of doing, like, when you read it and it's just the first gut reaction, and you know, English still not being first language, even though he speaks it extremely well, you know, you say things like, you know, like what he said. I think he said, "I feel sorry for Simran." That's what he said in that moment. And he didn't, like, that wasn't, he feels sorry about the whole situation. And I'm sure that is kind of what he meant, but it's like, she's ruined her life. And it's like, you can take it out of context, but you got to understand the way that our parents see things, and things. They're a different generation. And
I agree.
And it is a sorry situation. It is just a sorry situation. And that's what my dad feels. The whole situation is just sorry. And, you know, I'm really close to my dad. So it's not a case of, I don't talk to my dad or anything like that, or anything like scary like that. And you know, I'm very open with my dad. I say whatever I want to him. And as strict as my dad has been growing up, I've never been scared of voicing my opinion to him, and more than most people would ever do. But he has been stricter than a lot of my peers, you know, kind of thing. But we've had he's open at the same time as being very strict. But I think a lot of reaction that we had off the back of that situation with my dad was that my parents would act the same. Lots of people said my parents would be exactly the same, because you're torn between, you got to remember, it's family. You're torn between keeping your whole family together and your child. And like, in modern society, would be like, your children come first, right? This is what the West and everybody tells us. Whereas, like, where they come from and where they've come from, you know, you think about the family as a whole, and it hurts when it's your family, because it's going to destroy. It does, like, ruin relationships. You know, you sever certain relationships. You know, for me, saying that, it's also brought people together as well in so many ways. People that I didn't expect. But I mean, I don't know. I think, you know, I don't expect my dad to react. I mean, he was like, the fact that he is even in the documentary should speak volumes.
True.
Of course he's got my back. Of course he cares about me. It's just difficult for him to articulate, because he's also thinking about the rest of his family. Right? And he's right now, he's in Kenya, and, you know, he's gone back to Kenya, and he's been the first person there, and he's having to deal with people asking him a million questions. And that's not fair. That's not fair. You know, I think what people don't understand is that this isn't a stranger that did this to me. This is somebody we knew. And also the people she impersonated were people, the families we know. So the impact of this is so far-reaching in so many ways. It touches too many of us. It's not easy. There's people stuck in the middle. There's all sorts going on, you know, and it's not easy for anybody, and it's not fair. And this is why I feel perpetrators should be held to account, because everybody else is trying to, the silence, it's like everybody else is trying to fill in the gaps and like, whose fault, this fault. It's not like, well, that shouldn't be the way. If perpetrators were to hold their hands up, then that guesswork of or the onus wouldn't be on me, that, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And it's just the damage of somebody like who knows you doing it to you, and the fact that nobody in the family knows how they were stalked, or if they've been like what that person may have known or done, or maybe what they've shared with that person by accident. You don't know. And there's all these unanswered questions everywhere. Everyone's backs are up.
Do you get told about her life or anything at all from people, like friends of friends, family, the community? Do people come up to you with like information that you haven't asked for, and they're just like, you know, this is happening in her life?
Well, people do say stuff to me, but, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, what is that to me? Like, what can I do with that? I don't want to speculate. I can't, you know, like, if she's having a great time, that's upsetting. If, you know, it's like, I don't want to necessarily know. I just want the situation to be like resolved. I just want to have those answers, and I just want to feel safe. I don't want to be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. So that was the reason for the civil case. But it's like understanding the legal frameworks that exist around these things is pretty difficult, because even though we've done a civil case, no one's monitoring that person. It's not a criminal situation. So it's like, I don't feel 100% safe. You just don't know. And you know, things like it stops me from sharing things about the great work that I've been doing. It silences me. It's like, you're worried about sabotage, and you wouldn't know where that sabotage would come from, because you just don't know. And it's like, that's not okay. And it's not okay for other people who've around me as well, because like they all, like, people feel like, are we being watched? Is this being what you know, already after the documentary, I've been told that person's online, and it's like, well, she's not online as herself, is she? But it's like,
interesting.
So it's
because you know how the internet is. Everyone's tried to go down this rabbit hole of trying to find out accounts and profiles. And
yeah, I know, but I don't condone that either. The legal system, the justice system needs to do its work. You know, as a society, we shouldn't be like on these witch hunts for people. And you got to remember, like I said, it's family. It. You know, like, what did her mum and dad do wrong? As in, obviously, that they could have dealt with it, handled it better afterwards with me.
Did they?
No, but I, like, for me, like, you know, at the end of the day, whatever her mum and dad or her family or people around her, it's as a consequence of her actions. All of this, her parents are suffering, or don't think, like, it's hard. Like, I feel sorry for her family. They didn't do this. One person did this. As far as I know, one person did this, and it's having an impact on everybody, and it's not fair. It's not fair on anyone, is it? And I can't really, I mean, my biggest thing is that we do need to like sort out the legal frameworks. We need to sort out safe spaces for victims to speak. When I gone to the police, dealt with there and then properly, this whole 6 years saga would like going into 7 years now wouldn't be happening. There would have been no podcast. There would have been no civil case. Right. So if you have the right legal frameworks to deal with these things, and the right laws, the right understanding, no victim shaming, the safe spaces. I mean, like, I don't expect everybody to publicly speak, but they need to be able to, like, I didn't want to publicly speak. It wasn't my choice to do this. But I'm in the position, I'm just dealing with it.
Right.
And what I do want for victims to have is to be able to go into a police station, report the crime, and be taken seriously and it be investigated seriously, and for them to feel like they are being looked after. So many people write to me. It's shocking over the last few, since the podcast and now since the documentary, how many people have gone through it. And it's interesting from different parts of the world, what, how the perceptions as well. Right. So where honor is a big thing, those countries really are thankful for me to speaking out because they feel like they can't talk about these things. It's just like a different, you see who it impacts and who it doesn't.
My very last question to you, Kirat, and I'm going to try to bundle these all different questions that I have into one and leave the floor to you. You mentioned at the start that at some point at work, you sought mental counselling. You sought counselling. When the podcast came out and then the Netflix documentary came out, if I may ask you, did you try to get help? As in, did you try to seek maybe therapy? Because I think mental health is something I really want to bring out from this conversation. How do you see the future going forward? I know you're going on this amazing trip tomorrow, which is really exciting. When it comes to maybe dating, relationships, if we can touch on these different aspects of life, mental health, dating, relationship, and if I may, is there a part of you that has almost agreed to let go of the answers that we may never find out, that we may never get to?
Mental health, let's start there. I would advise anybody who's been in any kind of situation like this, go with somebody that you trust to the doctor. But yeah, I got emergency. I was lucky that I've had the same sort of doctors since I was a kid. So the doctors and the nurses at the surgery know me. So I was very, very lucky. Now the doctors in that surgery have changed. It's not the same. But at that point, they know me. They know what I'm about. They know me as a person. They know all the work that I do. So when I went in and explained, it was like a shock to them. And I had emergency counselling and emergency support. I had extra counselling sessions as well. But I was also of a very positive mindset that I need to get on with the rest of my life now. Like, I can't waste any more time. So I was very kind of pushing to make things happen and eager to enjoy my freedom and to get on with the rest of my life and catch up with everything that I'd missed. So, but then, there was a point where then I hit kind of a brick wall when you realize I need to deal with the situation. The police had gone quiet, lots of things were happening. And I was just really realizing that there were so many closed doors because of what happened to me. And every time that a door closed or I can't hit a brick wall, the reasoning always ended up because of what happened to me.
Right.
So I had to very quickly be quiet and just get on with stuff differently. So into sort of 2019, I then asked for help again, but because I'm quite positive, because of the way I come across how I do, there was a situation where I'd gone to the doctor a couple of times to say, I think I need more help. And it was like, no, you seem okay. You can have some be on antidepressants. And I was like, no. And then there was a locum in one day and explained again. And then we had my assessment again and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And then I had a psychotherapist who was absolutely brilliant. And you do break down sort of things that impact you, why you respond to certain things, why react. It's really, really, it was really good. And that really helped me. And I've got tools to help me now. It doesn't mean you don't still need help sometimes. I there's no shame in it. And I don't ever have any shame. I asked for help at work as well because I was just struggling with the mental stress at that point. I didn't feel like, oh my God, there's something wrong. It was just the whole situation's been so stressful. Hey, you've just put yourself in a position of you've got somebody who's not well in your family. Imagine you're working, you're going then to the hospital every day, sitting by the bedside, or you're trying to manage all of that. It's that, but I was trying to do it remotely. So I was just dealing with that and I just wanted some help with that. It wasn't it had only been a couple of months and I was just I think it was October. So it was that first October, just before it started to go wrong. And I didn't tell at that time. But I've always been very responsible for my mental health. My faith helped me, doing prayers, praying, that kind of stuff helped me. I think we have to take responsibility for ourselves. And I am quite a tough cookie. And yeah, I'm okay with saying, like, it's okay if you need help, if you need that space, if you can do that, that's really, really important for yourself, just to have that space to talk, space to understand, to kind of deregulate yourself, or to pull away, to unpick what happened. Like the psychotherapist, it was really interesting to unpick that whole situation and just break it down and deal with like my responses. So yeah, and I think it was really, really helpful. And I have had odd sessions here and there, but it is a lot difficult. Like now, it's not in the sort of like the scenario where it's immediate and emergency. It is difficult now to sort of get in there, and then you're on a massive waiting list for 6 months before you can even get help. It can be difficult, but if it's a serious scenario you're in and you've just found out, whatever, go in, push for the emergency, do whatever you need to, but dig your heels in, make sure you're taken seriously. So that's the mental health side of it. Dating side of it, well, I don't have any issues dating people. It's just finding, as long as it's just whether they have an issue dating me with all of this that's happened. And I just, the right people, I don't want to, if they do think that, then I don't want to date them anyway. So it's fine. I'm okay. Like I think we spoke earlier about it, and I'm okay. I can't hide this from anybody. I never planned to, and never at my age, I never intended to hide it. For everybody I've spoken to that I've dated has been absolutely fine with me. So, I have like people who know me have no issues with me. So
did you brave the dating world after the podcast and the Netflix documentary came out?
Yeah, absolutely. And after the documentary, less so, but people who I've people who I've dated, I'm still talking to, like friends. There's no judgment, and it's nice. Those are the right people. Those are the people that you want in your court. If those are the people that you want to consider the ones who respect you for what you've done, and not the ones who are scared of you because you dared to whatever. I'm not one of those fiery, feisty, like kick off at every thing. This is an important issue. We victim shame, we hide things, we do it. It's not okay. Like so many people go through stuff and we think it's okay to just brush it under the carpet. It's not. And if we can collectively come together and do something to make that happen, and if we can do things for the police and the police and the legal framework to change, to support these new, very fast changing technologies to and de-weaponize the internet, that would be really good. And we can change our views and views of things, and victim shaming, and start thinking again before we speak. Well, type now. It's do you need to say that? Is it okay? Are we saying it in a respectful way? It's going to be there forever. Think about it.
And the last bit about letting go.
And about letting go, I think for me, I just it's easier said for people to say just let go, or all that kind of stuff. I need the police case to be over. I would like I'm not going to pretend to say I don't want that accountability. Still, I do, because at the moment I still don't feel I'm going to be honest and say, as much as I'm carrying on with my life, there is that little bit of me that doesn't feel safe. So I would like that accountability. But in terms of like the anger I carry, and occasionally, like most of the time I'm fine, but sometimes when you're having a bad day, it does hurt. It does hurt. Like you do question, like why, what the hell, what did I do to deserve this, or any of that kind of stuff, because I've done, as far as I'm concerned, I've done nothing but be kind. So yeah, it does hurt, but there's never been this anger, but there's never that revengeful feeling, because it's not my place to punish. It's not my place to punish. I'm holding that person to account. I'm pushing for that accountability for that person, but it's not my place to punish or say what the punishment should be or anything like that. But we do need to discuss these things openly, and for the number of people that I see suffering or hear from, it's painful and it's sad that it happens. And I one of the main reasons for agreeing to do the podcast and then the documentary was that after the podcast, seeing how many people it helped, if you could take it to a bigger platform to help other people, then, so be it. And as much as the bad stuff that's happened out there, I know, and, I'm grateful for the conversations that I've had with people. I know it's helped people as well. So be it.
Well, on that note, Kirat, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I'm really grateful for you being here and also for trusting me with your story. I know this has gone on for a bit longer, but I really appreciate you being here, and I wish you all of the best. Good luck, love and peace, good health. Have an amazing trip, and I hope we get to see some of it. But I simply wish you the best of 2025 and more to come.
Oh, thank you, and happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you. Pisces.